Hi, Shannon Waller here, and welcome to Inside Strategic Coach with Dan Sullivan. Dan, we were talking yesterday, actually, about collaboration and what makes for successful collaboration and what doesn't. And you're working with a lot of clients and steering some of them away from potential messes. And we kind of brainstormed the idea it'd be really fun just to lay out some of the ground rules that make for a very successful collaboration and also what prevents you from an unsuccessful one. So what are some of the key things that you notice that are really important for people to align on, to agree upon? Let's define collaboration and then talk about, what are some of the important ground rules to follow?
This is kind of an update because I'm learning a lot, And I should say that there's two areas of experience that I'm going to talk about here. It's my own because I have 6 collaborations going back to 2013. So I've got about 8 years right now, and they've all worked. I've learned an awful lot about them for myself. But then for the last 3 years in a program that we call the Free Zone, I've worked with probably 50 anyway, really top-notch entrepreneurs, very successful in guiding them to improve the collaborations they already have, and then to help them think through new collaborations. And I should say that when we talk about collaboration here, Shannon, I think we're talking about an entirely new business structure in a marketplace. And what a lot of people call collaboration is creating a deal with each other. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to go through some ground rules that you asked me to think about. And when we go through the ground rules, and there's 4 of them immediately that I think are really crucial, you'll see how different it is from, any kind of relationship, and there's lots of very powerful agreements and mergers and acquisitions, mm-hmm. but it's not collaborations as far as I can see in the way that we're talking about it in Strategic Coach.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And just one point about that, Dan, in terms of that program that you're talking about. Well, you've worked with entrepreneurs longer than I have, but in my 30 years, your 50 years of working with entrepreneurs, collaboration is the highest level of entrepreneurship I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. And it's beyond competition. Being freed up from competition is such an incredible opportunity. You can only do it if certain things are in place. We talk about that a lot in Strategic Coach. But once you're at that point, there's almost a whole new territory to go into, which a lot of people can't see. And I know this will feed into our ground rules, but
it's become much easier to do as a result of what I call the Zoom revolution, that you can very, very easily communicate and collaborate with people who may be half the world away from you, so that's made a big difference, the sudden jump in virtual communication.
Well, we saw it happen in a workshop over the course of 3 or 4 hours, and it was across the world, and it was thanks to Zoom. So Zoom and whole virtual communications has made it faster, easier, cheaper with a much bigger result. Mm-hmm. It's kind of spectacular. So that's another great point. So what is your number 1 ground rule for an effective collaboration, Dan?
Well, it's very, very interesting because what most of my examples are 2 entrepreneurial companies. Mm-hmm. And actually, they're not competitors. They don't do the same thing. What they have in common is that they both serve the same end user out in the marketplace. Mm. For example, I have one with a man who's quite a bit more famous than I am, Peter Diamandis. And when Richard Branson, a month ago, so is credited with being the first private space flight into outer space that will then be open for customers. Well, the person who created the whole idea behind this and created what's called an X Prize competition to create the airplane that eventually became the one that Richard Branson is using is Peter Diamandis. He's got a really great background, university. He's a serial entrepreneur. 10 years ago, I met him. I read a book. He had a best-selling book called Abundance. Then he was one of the biggest ever, most popular speakers on TED. Mm-hmm. And he just has a very compelling, powerful way of explaining that digital technology in all forms is taking us very, very quickly from a world of scarcity to a world of abundance. He's just sort of very, very knowledgeable about almost any breakthrough technology. And I said, boy, I'd really like to have his capability for my strategic coach clients. I'm what I would say as a civilian, I'm not involved in the technological world. I'm pretty knowledgeable, and I've kept track of it for the last half century, but I'm not the one who could possibly be a guide to anyone. And the other thing is we couldn't make this part of the strategic coach program. It has to be an optional outside feature that strategic coach clients can sign up for. So we did a deal, a collaborative deal. We're in our 10th year right now. It's been a knockout hit, and it's called Abundance 360. If you look it up online, you'll get the full information on this. And just about every year, we have about half the attendance. And I'm the one who markets it for my clients to go to his program. And the way we set it up is that he owns it 100%. The program, he owns 100%. And all the money that he gets from people attending, that's his money. But he had to commit to me for 25 years because I want that capability for 25 years. Mm-hmm. It's had a profound impact on the entrepreneurs and coach who are deeply interested in this and gone, and it's changed their lives. So in that sense, it demonstrates the first ground rule of collaboration is that together you have to create something that is a great value creation benefit to the same end user. In my case, it's entrepreneurs. It's really successful, ambitious entrepreneurs, and half of them are strategic coach clients. Okay, so I'm able, through a collaboration with Peter, to actually create an incredible program, but it costs nothing to strategic coach. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We don't pay anything for Peter's expertise. We just put out the word. Peter and I will do video interviews and we'll talk through the conference and, the seats are sold, and it's not inexpensive. It's a big ticket item. And when they go, it's just the cream of the crop of the great technological innovators in probably 10 to 12 different industries who come, and it's 3 days, and it has been in Los Angeles, but last year we did it virtually. And it was tremendous. It was tremendous. But I get him to commit for 25 years because it was good the first year that we did it. But by, already I would say in the 10th year, it's the greatest technological deep dive in a short period of time that anybody can take on the planet. And we created that together. So the first thing is that we've satisfied ground rule number 1, which is you have to be totally in agreement of who you want to serve. Who do you want to be a hero to? And Peter wants to be a hero to entrepreneurs, and I want to be a hero to entrepreneurs. So we have total agreement, and that'll be even more so throughout the 25 years that we're doing it. Then the second thing is that you're essentially creating something brand new that neither of you could have created on your own. I couldn't have created Abundance 360 on my own. And guess what? Neither could Peter. Peter could have created this. And we created it. So something new got created. And, there's kind of imitators out there. But one thing, they just don't have the partnership that's propelling them. And they aren't going to last for 25 years. There's no possibility for them lasting 25 years. That's the second ground rule, is that you create something brand new. And now there's something even more powerful from my standpoint that got created. And that is, just last week, I came back from a 5-day deep dive into regenerative medicine, which I think is probably going to be the center of global progress over the next 50 years, is everything related to regenerative medicine, where everything that's damaged in people, everything that's defective in people, over the next 50 years, you'll be able to correct it scientifically and technologically. It'll be correctable. And not only that, but what we call aging is simply the sum total of probably a dozen curable diseases. And as each of those diseases gets cured, you're essentially curing aging.
Mm-hmm. That's an incredible byproduct out of that collaboration, Dan. And it's interesting that collaboration that you and Peter have just keeps fueling new innovations, keeps fueling new opportunities because he's got very successful, ambitious entrepreneurs who are willing to learn and to pay for and to be an audience for what he can put together. So it's really this symbiotic isn't quite the right word, but this ever increasing, nourishing multiplier relationship that spins off entirely new things that wouldn't have seen the light of day otherwise.
Yeah. And he's probably the most alert and curious technological breakthrough scout and pioneer. He's kind of mapping out the terrain for a lot of other people. He's kind of like a map maker, who's taking unexplored territory and creating maps so that people can travel, and take advantage of these new breakthroughs. So we have the two ground rules is that you have to want to be a hero to the same person, same type of person, and then you create something new. But there's an agreement right from the front that it's not about exchange of money. There's no exchange of money. So people say, well, I get how Peter gets paid for this. How do you get paid for this? I get paid in other ways, but I'll tell you about the capability. And that is that there's no way in the world that someone could have someone like Peter Diamandis as a regular annual, deep dive technological coach. You just couldn't pay for this. And it costs us zero. I mean, it doesn't use up any time of our team, doesn't use up any money from our budget to have this, and yet we have it. But on the other hand, we've put in over 8 years with renewals and that, we've put in thousands of clients, on average about probably 150 a year. It'll be 10 this year times 10. Well, that's 1,500, 1,500 purchases of your year. And just as a result of being identified at Peter's conference, the other thing is Peter and I have a long, very, very popular podcast series called Exponential Wisdom, which has been going for about 6 years. There's a top 2% of podcasts in the world, and our podcast is in the top 2%, as yours and the one we're doing here, we're in the top 2% too. And that's a big deal because there's 2 million podcast series in the world and we're in the top 2%. And I'm known to be, a collaborative partner with Peter. And we've had, I think right now, about 65 entrepreneurs who we met at Abundance 360 who, talked to us and they joined our program. And that's worth a lot because signups for our program, on average now, on the minimum, they probably spend about 4 years, especially when they come from that background. So the big thing is that there's no exchange of money. Money doesn't exchange of hands. When we're not paying for our clients to be in Peter's program, our clients are paying to be in Peter's program. We're just making the capability. Okay. Number 4 is if agreeing to this takes any more than a handshake, it's too complicated. Okay, so Peter and I, we did a little test case, which was a very small gathering, but within about a month, we were able to get 35 paying customers for him. It was a surprise and it was last minute, but just putting out the word to our client base, we filled a smaller room in Silicon Valley, and Peter says, I don't know anybody who can do this. I've never seen anyone who can do that. And I said, well, if you give me a little bit more time, I can, and you have more seats, I can get more butts. Anyway, and, our business model is that all the money's up front. I learned from going to the movies over a lifetime. When do you pay for a movie? You don't pay on the way out. You pay on the way in. So those are 4 of the ground rules, that all your money is yours. And if it requires a contract and requires a lawyer, it's not a collaboration. And the other thing is that you just have to like each other. You have to be really, really excited. And the thing is, I don't need this for Strategic Coach to be a successful, profitable business. And he doesn't need it for his universe of entrepreneurial companies. Neither of us need it for the money, but we both want it for the adventure.
I like that a lot, Dan. So let me just quickly recap, and I want to do a deeper dive on the money part because I'm sure a lot of people are like, how does that work? So you both really need to want and be aligned on being a hero to the same audience, to the same people. You create something new that neither one of you could have created independently. It's a result of that. And then I know also other people have no clue how you possibly managed to pull that off. Your money is your money and their money is their money. So the payoff is not cash, but more capability and opportunity and adventure and that creativity that is possible. And that actually has a much longer term payoff. It's almost like cash is the byproduct, but not the goal, right? The goal is capability and increased.
Well, you couldn't create the capability under any other circumstances.
Right.
You couldn't pay to develop this capability. It can only be created. And the other thing we were talking about last weekend, because we were together, Peter and Babs, my partner in life in Strategic Coach, we were for 5 days, together. And I said, we'll make it through 25 years and we'll never have a business meeting on the enterprise that we've created here. And yet it'll be one of the most remarkable enterprises in the world. There will be no accounts. There will be no looking at the numbers. There will just be nothing. It's just talking to people. We've got this great program. You may be interested in it. And he's got like 6 quarterly, updates, which are virtual. One of the personal things that I never made part of the deal, but he says, Dan, I'm going to be your personal VIP introducer to every breakthrough health and fitness in the world as you go forward. And he says, I'll personally scout out, I'll secure the relationship, and I'll introduce you. So I've got this person who every day is thinking about, my longevity and my health and my fitness,
And Dan, I'm saying this partially, not in jest or as a pun, but it's in a very abundant way to look at a business relationship. It's not about taking what's my share, that sort of thing. It's actually what can I give, what can I contribute? So you're thinking about Peter in terms of how to fulfill his lifetime goals. He's thinking about you and how to support and provide for your lifetime goals.
And he's in my program. He's in Strategic Coach, so, I've been a 10-year member of the Strategic Coach program. And so I'm in his program, he's in my program. But the money is a ever-growing byproduct.
Oof. I like that term, ever-growing byproduct, as you create value. Now, I want to just this might be a little bit of a bonus one, which is always fun. And that is that you were also coaching someone the other day, something that he thought was a potential collaboration was not, in fact. And you said something interesting, which is actually what provoked this conversation. So you said something about if it has you have to create something new. So talk about that.
If it forces you to change your normal activity as an entrepreneur, it's not a collaboration. I'm not doing anything new 10 years into this collaboration. I just do what I do at Strategic Coach, and Peter just does what he does in his company. Neither of us has had to change anything that we work on in our business on a daily basis. It requires no work. There's just an extra communication that I make, but I'm communicating to my clients all the time. And I take 10 minutes and I say, oh, by the way, we've got our new A360 360 coming up in January, and we have 25 seats left. Please let us know right away, because as we get closer to the deadline, they fill up very, very quickly. And that's it. We send out little trailers of some of the speakers and everything else, and that fills it up. I'm not doing anything different after 10 years than I did 10 years before we did it. So that's the big thing, is you don't change who you are. You don't change your activity. You're just combining the capabilities.
Well, and that whole idea of, in Strategic Coach terms, it's unique ability. You are protected. You're within your particular sphere of your unique contribution, and how you want to make an impact, as are they. And those combined things create something brand new, but you're not pushed out of your lane,
Yeah.
put it that way, which is really powerful because I think a lot of people go, oh, I know how to do this part, but not that part. Is it worthwhile? And then it gets super complex. You're talking about an incredibly simple way for people to do, I call it front stage teamwork. It's what teamwork with other companies looks like. And that's really powerful. And these are really useful ground rules and very different than how most people are used to thinking about working together.
What I notice is, for example, I was talking to someone yesterday and he said, I've created this really great online program and I'm thinking, about now franchising it. And I said, how do you feel about learning how to, do you know how to franchise? And he says, no. I said, so how do you feel now that you've got to almost start from zero and learn an entire farm, but you're not even sure it's going to work. You're not even sure it's going to work, right? You don't even know who's going to buy it, right? Yeah. And I said, so how do you feel about that? You're 55 years old and it's like you're starting from scratch on an enterprise that you don't even know if it's going to be successful. How do you feel about that? And he said, I never saw it that way. way. And I says, well, you were leading a great life. You've been telling me over the last year, you've been leading a great life and you got things the way you want them. And now you're doing something that's going to totally disrupt it. It's going to put you into a lot of nervous nights, probably cut down on your free days. You probably have to work longer. Going to put your own money up. Sounds pretty scary. And I was doing it. And I said, here, who do you want to serve? And I took it, what we just did over the last, I said, ground rule number 1, ground rule number 2, ground rule number 3, and everything else. And he says, well, I don't know what to do then. And I said, well, what's the unique thing that you've created that made you so ambitious about creating a franchise operation? He said, well, I've got this way of thinking and I've created all these thinking tools and everything. And I said, well, that's great. Okay. So instead of doing that, I said, if you had 10 people in the room right now who are the end user, could you put together a really good program for them? And you already know how to do it. And he says, yeah, but I have to get the videos. No, you don't have to do anything. Put it on a diagram on a sheet of paper. Paper, very, very good technology. It's been a very durable technology. Paper, and you can adjust things really quickly and everything like that. And I says, you've been in Strategic Coach for 25 years. Is it a Hollywood production? He says, no. Is it a Broadway stage show? He says, no. I said, what I do is I give you a lot of interestingly designed papers where you can write all your own information down. Start with 10 people. And I said, you don't know anything yet about the marketplace here. Start with people who are your existing clients, and do it. So long story too, I said, what's your dream of how many people will use this? And he says, well, I think 1 million people will use it. And I said, yeah, but you don't know whether it actually works for one person. If it works for one person, 50% about whether it'll work for 10 people.
Right.
10 people tell you, 50% of what will work for 100 people. You don't have to spend a lot of money to get that learning, okay? And then stop. And then look at someone who's got a great national or global franchise operation that serves the same person you do, but provides a totally different value, and say, hey, as an add-on to what you're already doing, what would you think about my process here? They've already built the network. They've already built the customers. They would sell your product because they're already customers. And their money's their money and your money's your money, And he said, but I wouldn't own it. And I said, own what? I said, if it works, which of you is going to stop it? Anyway, so it's an interesting discussion. And I should say, I look very confident and capable about it, but it's just that I've seen with 60 different individuals what works and what doesn't work. And it's kind of like the ground rules. If you don't do them 100%, you get 0.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I really like that. That was a little bit of a masterclass on how to get an idea tested in the marketplace, which is test on check writers.
Yeah.
If you want to be valuable for 1 million people, good. Start with 1, then 10, then 100. That's just great coaching. If you do want to have an idea that you want to generate to be a collaboration, that's what it takes. Like, you have to be really confident and clear in your unique contribution and capabilities in order to be able to have a collaboration with someone who could multiply or simplify you. That's almost like the prequel to what you're talking about. So just to summarize, as we wrap up, you need to be totally aligned and want to be a hero to the same person, same audience, know who that is. Number 2 is that really your creativity and their creativity is actually creating a third thing that wouldn't otherwise exist. So Abundance 360 is a great example. Their money's their money, your money's your money. So Peter's money is his, strategic coach clients are ours, and it's just this great collaboration and connection. And then keep it really simple. You probably don't need a lawyer. A handshake, a really clear understanding, we would say an impact filter would really be the success criteria. And then make sure that your idea has been well tested before you bring it to the table.
Yeah. And in my case, and this isn't everybody's situation, but I plan to be alive and very active and successful 25 years from now. So I said, if this is worth me being involved in it, I want to know whether the other person is in it for 25 years. Okay. Because it isn't going to get any more difficult over the next 25 years. It's going to get more interesting. It's going to get more creative. It's going to get more productive. There's going to be more unique breakthroughs. But you'll never have to do anything except what you're already doing.
Actually, I think the time frame, Dan, is such a great litmus test to see how engaged is someone, how fascinated and motivated are they by their idea.
Yep.
If they're looking for a quick buck, that's not going to be a lasting collaboration. So that 25 years, and I know when you asked Peter that question right before he went on stage, and it just galvanized something for him. I know I've been part of Abundance 360 for most of those years, and it's incredible.
All of these years.
And it keeps getting better and richer and more refined. One of my other little takeaways is that, thinking about the great crossover, and you're talking about microtechnology, we're in that next shift, which is regenerative medicine. So thank you for that little tidbit as well, Dan. That's a great thing to lead into the future. So fascinating. Thank you very much for laying out the ground rules for great entrepreneurial collaborations. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.